Okay, so hey there, everyone. Welcome to emelletv. I'm Gabriel, also known as Fake Nichols on the social media. I work for a company called Walnut.app here in Brazil, where we work with the new central bank payment system for the digital economy. Uh, okay, that's basically me. I'm also a teacher of ReScript. I always forget to say that. I'm bringing in and getting a ReScript course with Marcos from Brazil for the Brazilian community. We are working on that too. I also like to deal with some shady cryptocurrencies like Tezos and other stuff. And that's basically me.
Yeah, so I'm David. I'm from Barcelona. I work for a company called Ahrefs. It's a SEO tool, a lot of verticals, a lot of data, huge team, and has been like successful since I think 10 years ago. I just recently joined. I joined like 4 months ago, um, and I'm working on as a product engineer there, as software, mostly doing web, but part time I'm doing style ppx. So part of the infrastructure needs to be compiled by CSS and the whole jumps. So yeah, we are hiring. That's not sponsored, but if you are referred by me, we can have a party in Brazil probably with referral.
Oh.
So happy if someone wants to apply. The process is easy. Just let me know. We're not sponsored yet by Ahrefs. Hopefully someday we can have Dimitri on a call and have another logo in the top right corner. So yeah, you need to message me, Eduardo. That's the easy one. So yeah, we are very happy to be here with Jaap. Jaap is gonna join us in a minute, but he has been like maintaining a super important piece of the ecosystem, and he would explain much better than I do what is the journey and what are the challenges basically. So yeah, welcome to emelletv, where we bring like all the people that are interested in the ML languages, also known as ReScript, Reason, and OCaml. We are gonna call them ML languages from now on. Otherwise, we're gonna spend like the entire show mentioning them. So yeah, that's the intro. Get started.
Okay, so let me get to Jeff back on. Hey there, Jeff.
Hey, hey, super great to be here. I was actually
Hey, Jaap.
wondering what the name was coming from, ML, and I didn't even connect the dots with that it's referring to ML languages. So
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. So you want to present yourself a little bit?
yeah, so I'm Jaap. I kind of got started with ReScript and BuckleScript. I guess about 2 years ago. So I started the company where we basically created a parenting app in React Native, and this was a pretty nice app. We were featured by Apple quite a bit, but that company is basically we raised some initial funding, but we couldn't raise the second round. So currently, I have a new job, and I'm working for Walnut. And again, they use ReScript for everything. So I'm still using it. Yeah, I mean, that's basically my introduction. I think we're going to talk a bit more about GraphqlPPx and all of that. But that's, yeah, that's my short introduction.
Cool. Let me ask more about the company and the parenting app. How is that called? And what's a parenting app for the ones that we don't have kids, which is only me. But yeah.
Yeah, so I started it with my co-founder, and we kind of wanted to create the like kind of the calm and the headspace for parents, where it's very important to spend like a quality time with kids, and there's actually not that many apps in the App Store. So we were like, okay, this is a really good opportunity to build something. And I mean, it basically helps parents with inspiration about like stuff you can do, like activities. For instance, if you're at home and you want to do something, and there's just a lot of inspiration, like kind of games you can play, conversations that you can have, those kind of things. Right. And it also on the other side, there's a lot of like tips if you have like challenging situations, like you have like a toddler and he's having a tantrum, and we had a lot of like advice about how to resolve that. And right. We had like a network of experts that gave like suggestions how to deal with it, those kind of things. Yeah. And so just to kind of like tell a bit more about that. So we had like very scrappy prototype just with like TypeScript. I built it using just JavaScript actually, and Elixir in the backend. And I heard about ReasonML. I think I was just following Hacker News, so I saw it when it was very early, when it just was announced, and I was like, oh, that's super interesting. I just keep follow it a little bit, see where it's going. And back then, I think there was like the third iteration of the syntax, and BuckleScript was getting more and more mature. And I was like, oh, I'll just give it a try. I just start with like one component and write it in ReasonML and see where it's going. And yeah, I mean, it was amazing. I was actually in the process of converting the codebase to TypeScript, but I didn't really like it because there's just so much annotations you need to do, and I really appreciated being able not to annotate anything. Is a beard needed? I guess so. I mean, I definitely saw a lot of people with beards. Yeah, so and just went with it, and I think actually what sold me was the example. I think I saw I don't know where I saw it, but it was like an example of GraphqlPppx, where you have like the query and automatically it's typed, and you don't need to do anything. Yeah, I think it's Sean had like a presentation where he showed, okay, this is GraphqlPppx. This is right. Amazing. Yeah.
So that's really cool. What was like previously for you? So you said that you did the backend in Elixir and the frontend in frontend or React Native, I suppose. In Java, what were like your initial thoughts to software? What languages? How did you end up doing that app, basically?
Right. Yeah. So I used a bunch of technologies. Like, I mean, my company before Family 5, I started another company, and I also used Elixir in the backend, and I used TypeScript. Pretty standard. And I think like with Elixir, I was really introduced to like functional programming, and before that, I did Ruby on Rails, JavaScript, of course, PHP, but I was really, I was always in the dynamic typing camp, because I always thought like static types are just slowing you down. You're not that productive, and I kind of like, compared it to Java, and it's like, okay, static types might be useful, but it's just, a lot of boilerplate. And when I was like using Elixir, I kind of like read a bit more about like, okay, what other programming languages are there, and I kind of like read about Camel, and I was like really interested in it because it's like functional programming languages that has has types, and I was like, I saw the problems with having no types, because like in Elixir, you just have a lot of problems that a type checker could have found, and you write a lot of like unit tests and like tests to be able to get to make sure that you don't have problems. But
Right.
yeah, I was just really interested in like, oh, maybe there's a combination. And with OCaml, you know, not having to write the types, but the types being there, yeah, just was really interested in that concept.
So,
but
yeah, sorry to interrupt. Go on.
Yeah, no, yeah.
So when you first, so you were first introduced to the OCaml compiler through Reason. What were your like first like 1 hour experience? What, like the first day that you create a component and then went out with your friends? What you tell them? What you would tell them about Reason? What were your first feelings?
Yeah, it was definitely not an easy experience at first. I think, you know, the tooling wasn't great, and, you know, the error messages were not great. And also, you'd have to think a little bit in a different way than just writing JavaScript. So yeah, I think like you have to kind of get, like, it has to, at some point it has to click, but it's there. I think there are just a few very interesting concepts that I think, for instance, like writing a reducer and using like the ADTs, it's just so nice that that kind of like for me that was something like, wow, this is amazing. But definitely, yeah, it's not a super easy experience. But once, like, I think OCaml is, you know, the first steps are a little bit hard, but the language is not that complex compared to like TypeScript. So I found that, you know, with TypeScript, I was often like looking for ways how to type it, like how to type code that I wrote, and it's like, it's such a complex type system that it's like you're often in a situation where like, okay, I don't know how to type this, and I just use the any type and you know, resolve it later. And I think with Reason, it's a little bit like it's different, where once you have the type system in your head, it's you know, sometimes you have errors and you're like, okay, how do I resolve this? But
yeah,
but almost never.
The system is way more smaller. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think we can all relate that feeling, like, oh, I know how to type everything, maybe wrong, but how to type everything. I think that feeling, that's quite like, yeah, definitely. Like this being small is definitely, yeah. Once, would you think that the click, when you did the click, was like first week, or on the first day you already like understood like deeply what statically typed meant?
Well, I just started with a very simple component and just importing that component in the code base, and I just kept on, you know, figuring it out, starting with some simple stuff and then doing more complex stuff later. Right. So at first I just did some components. That was pretty great. I also kind of enjoyed the learning. So it's maybe productivity at first is not super high, but at least you're right. It's interesting to learn, and it's kind of spread. So I think, you know, once I started using GraphQL in the code base, I was like, okay, now I have to convert. I didn't convert everything, but at least the new stuff that I built, I just built in ReScript.
Right, that's cool, because if you started with the components, then at some point you would need to arrive to the data, or arrive to logic, and then arrive to the data at some point. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was at that point. I think it's better right now, but I was like looking for ways to type the GraphQL response, which is possible using ReScript with those generators that basically generate ReScript types. But the tooling was pretty bad, and once I saw what's possible with like Reason, I was like, okay, let's give this a try. Because actually the what like if you look at an app, it's if you have a crash, it's much worse than with a web app. Like with a web app, you can just easily like roll back a change or like release a new version. But for an app in the App Store, you can submit a new build, and it takes like often a few days. So and so we had quite a few crashes, and then it's always tricky to fix it. And usually it's forget to include a field in the GraphQL query.
Right.
And I mean, that was a big motivation for using ReScript, and I think it really worked, because after we started using ReScript, we almost had no crashes. It was only like in some like strange situations where we still had like a runtime type error.
Right. But that's curious to know, because like, were you using Expo or just React Native out of the box?
Yeah, the first version of the app was in Expo, but we had to eject the application, right, because we used some like native dependencies.
Right. So
I mean, yeah, there's the hot code upgrade, or like you can do the release that sends the release over the but yeah,
like update, or I don't know how that's called, but definitely possible with Expo, right?
Yeah, and we could use that, but we never really did it.
Right. That's good. That's good. So you started writing your app in React Native with Reason. You probably fight a lot of bindings as well, and then you start with GraphQL. How you end up maintaining the graphql-ppx? Like, what's the story between that moment and now? Because for me, it's blurry. I was maybe not here, and I was not curious enough to ask. But yeah. How's the whole story?
Yeah, I mean, I basically started using the graphql-ppx in the application and just run into some issues. And I think it was right around the time that I was using it for quite a while, and then the change in the BuckleScript compiler came that basically records became like objects, which was not
7.2,
before.
I think, right?
Yeah, before it was like arrays. And so I was wondering, like, oh, can we not, records are much nicer, especially if you use pattern matching, and with GraphQL responses, they can be pretty deep, and not being able to pattern match is that's not great. And I was like, how hard can it be? Can we just not, have records instead of objects? But I didn't realize that actually the whole ppx,
right,
they were not like types generated, so it was all like it was all inverted types. So it was and so
right, because like everything was expected to be objects, right?
Everything was objects, yeah,
right.
And polymorphic
but
variants.
Not JavaScript objects, like was the object in Reason that time, right?
Yeah. So I think I did like one change in ppx before. There was there was the output of the ppx was quite big. So if you had like nested queries, you had like an explode, like the code size would like quadratically increase with the bigger queries. So if you looked at the JavaScript generated, it became like very big. And I saw that and I was like, okay, that's not great, because we also had a web part. We also exposed part of the application on the web. And so I kind of looked into that and tried to find like a fix for that. And I think that's the first big change that I made to the ppx. I kind of like first made an issue, and then nothing really happened. And then I was like, oh yeah,
right.
I think I looked at the code many times, and then it drew the conclusion that it's like, that's too hard. And then at some point it's like, just try to get to make some change.
Yeah, that's the champion mentality of open source, actually. So yeah,
and
cool.
The ppx is amazing. It was originally built by Magnus, which is who built the first version of it in OCaml. And then Thomas converted it all to Reason, and he made like a lot of improvements to the ppx. So, and then I made this code size improvement, which basically, because you already know the shape of the data, you don't need to do a lot of like checks anymore, and that also decreases the size of the parse function that's being generated as part of the ppx. So I think that was my first PR that I made to the ppx, and then there was like a huge PR where basically I tried to have the objects be records instead, so I started very like naively, and then I realized, the whole module that needs to be generated needs to be quite different. So we need to generate all the types that the whole, all the types of the response. And so it was quite a big effort, and I kind of like every evening I was like spending some time and making some progress towards like the new version. It's cool to have like small wins.
Right.
So
that's how the OCaml rabbit rolls. Gets you right. I'm just gonna do this small ppx for some simple thing, and then when you realize, you end up doing this huge endeavor.
Yeah. So I mean, so that really helped. I really that was also really helpful in the app. When we had records, I saw that the code became much clearer. And so next, we had some issues with fragments. So I really wanted to use fragments, but the support for fragments was not that great. So yeah, it's like one after the other. It's like adding more stuff. And just to make a long story short, I was like, okay, it's probably good to make like a 1.0 release, because the changes were so breaking that it's probably good to settle on a final approach, like a final interface for the modules that are being generated with the ppx. So I think I don't know when it was, but released a 1.0 version, and I think it's pretty stable now, because most of the, I think, asked a lot of comments in the community, like, and we settled on at least a module interface that is pretty stable right now. Anyway, so I saw, what do you think about ppxs? I think they're amazing. They're really great, but it's a bit of a rough tool. So it's super hard to get started, and with macro. So been using Elixir, and in Elixir it's super easy to make a macro as part of your app. It's just basically just a function that you can use, and it just runs on compile time. And with ppxs, it's there's a lot of ceremony. You basically have an executable that runs on every file. It's a bit heavy, but they're super powerful. So you can do basically anything. You can transform the AST into, do a transformation on the AST. You can do anything you want. But I think it would, so I think for GraphqlPPX, PPX is definitely fine because it's a very important part of your application. But I sometimes wish to create, do some meta programming for some small part of the application. And then it's just too hard, it's just too heavy to create a PPX for that. So I think having some kind of macro functionality as part of language would be amazing.
That's true.
Did you have any experience with the AST or parsing and compiling, all these fuzzy terms that are plenty of books and plenty of the barrier is very high? Did you have any experience before?
Yeah, so I did some work on Babel plugins. I think that's the only thing I really worked on, where you kind of also work with the AST and make some modifications. And but I didn't study computer science in college, so I didn't have the compiler scores and everything like that. So so this is working on GraphqlPPX is amazing because it's basically a compiler, and it's very cool to see the whole thing and have a practical example of how a compiler works with Elixir, a parser, printer, everything.
That's true.
Yeah. So
that's
also
really cool. Very cool. I need to agree for sure.
Yeah, it's also amazing. Writing compilers it's so OCaml is so great for that. Recently I made a small addition to GraphqlPPX to read the SDL. So you have a way to define your schema, and so the GraphqlPPX could only read that in JSON form. But you also have the SDL notation, where it's basically similarly how you write queries. You can also define your schema in that way. But we didn't have a parser for that. So I wrote a parser for the PPX just with plain OCaml, and it was so cool that just have
very much. Yep.
You can just write to the parser and write all the variants and match with all the patterns, and you have a loop with the compiler, and after a while it just works, or it doesn't work, but at least most of it is it just works.
Right. Yeah, I think here on the show we are very fans of the word PPX, because every time the word PPX happens, everybody jumps on the chat and says what's their opinion about the PPX. So definitely we are huge fans, at least of the topic. Some people are good haters, some people are bad haters. So I wanted to ask how was the experience on maintaining a big PPX? You mentioned that you did this breaking change for objects to records, and you spend a lot of time, bit by bit, small improvements. How is that? Because Reason is not a huge community, and I think it differs a lot from maintaining an open source project that is super famous, like Webpack, which at the end of the day is as well a compiler. From a GraphqlPppx, which is a very huge piece of the ecosystem, but from a much smaller ecosystem. What are your views on that?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to teach these changes for myself, so I started building them. And I think in hindsight, there was just a very big breaking change with PPX. And I was kind of I was thinking there's not that many people using this, so it's not that bad to have breaking change now and like focus on having like a stable, like a stable interface right now for everyone that comes later. And after after that, I realized that actually there were quite a lot of people that used the old version, and they had a big challenge to convert to the new version. So I think in hindsight, it would have been better to think about a better migration path. Like one of the first things I did at my new job at Walnut was converting, because they also still use the old version of the ppx, and it's if you have a pretty big code base, it's the conversion is pretty hard because every query result is different, and you need a new client, like a new version of the client, and like it's tricky.
It's a do or die kind of factor. Yep.
Yeah, and it's tricky because it's also there's very limited time, and you want to make good contributions, but it's always like very important to also look at the migration from one to the other. And I still think there's still some companies using the old version of the ppx.
Yeah, I left Rabbit and we didn't migrate yet, so hopefully they migrated already. Otherwise, they're still with objects. So cool. So just touching a little bit drama, because drama is the second famous word here in the show, of course. But we try to not get negative or anything. And I think from your temper, you are the kind of person that doesn't get in the nerves. So I think we're safe here to mention drama a little bit.
Yeah.
So ReScript and ppxs, I think that has been discussed in the forum, discussed in the Discord, and you step up with a problem with I believe it's 9.0, just the new version of the ReScript compiler. So what your feelings about like all of this?
Yeah, I think it's I think the direction ReScript is going is pretty good, but also a bit sad because I think it's good in the sense that you just have to focus on one thing, and the community is very small, and you just need to find kind of a way to make it bigger, and you cannot do everything. And I think the ambition of Reason was quite big for having like native, compiling to native, compiling to web. So I think it's reasonable to go one direction and really focus on compiling to JavaScript. But it's also a bit. I feel like it's a bit of a shame that the two communities, like the Camel people, kind of like were not as of kind of like. I think that those people are left the community for a large part, and what to say about it? But in the end, I think it's better to make like a choice. And I think what happened with ReScript, the documentation is better, the language server is better. I think the syntax, like the parser, is better right now. So a lot of good things. But yeah, and so with ppxs,
what are the parts that are not very good?
So I think it's a bit of the fear around ppxs. So a lot of people, I got a lot of messages after some claims of the ReScript team that they think ppxs are not supported anymore. So if you depend on like a ppx like graphql-ppx, that can be quite like, okay, if they stop supporting ppxs, that's just a big problem for my project that I'm maintaining. So I think the communication is not always great, because I don't think they are planning to like deprecate or not support ppxs anymore. So mostly they want you to use their compiler hooks and not use like ppxlib or anything like that, which is like it's fine. It's just like the nice thing with graphql-ppx was that it was supported. It supported both native and ReScript. So if you just have a ppx for ReScript, it won't work. You cannot have like one project that supports both. But yeah, that's maybe it's not a big problem. So what I'm planning right now is kind of to fork the project into two projects, one native ppx and one ReScript ppx.
Makes sense. Makes sense. What would happen? Let's try to imagine what happens if ReScript tomorrow, not tomorrow, in 1 year they deprecate ppxs. Would graphql-ppx would still like make sense to be like a code generation tool, but not be as part of your source? Some sort of like same as ATDs does, or I believe like many, like there's some JavaScript solutions as well, when you have like your GraphQL side by side with your source code, and graphql-ppx or another name of project, whatever, would generate the same types and the same code generated for you side by side. Would that still make sense, or is like a dead end for GraphQL if they deprecate it?
Yeah, I guess you have to do something like generate files, which is basically what TypeScript, what you also need to do with TypeScript. So you basically parse the code and generate like ReScript files. It's just a little bit like it's a little bit worse because you need to like run another program that looks at source files and creates new files and deletes them when when they're not necessary anymore. I think makes everything a lot harder, and so it's not a great solution for graphql-ppx. But if we have to, I think there are ways to do it. But I think like having this ppx as part of the language is what makes it so nice in comparison to like TypeScript. Part of it.
Definitely cool. So yeah, I wanted to mention that you seem very calm. Is that the coldness from the Netherlands, or what's the secret from the rest of us that we are half Brazilian, half Spanish, and we have like a lot of temper? How would you deal with conflicts in life and all of this like mentality?
Yeah, I'm from the northern part of the Netherlands, and it's like I think we're known for like being a bit like that. But yeah, I don't know. It's just how I am, I guess. Cool. But I think I can be like passionate about stuff, have opinions about stuff. So
when was the last time that you scream at the computer?
That's a good question.
Did that ever happen?
Scream at the computer. No.
Yeah, the compiler should be like very huge to scream at a computer, but yeah, what I meant was like getting mad at something that happened online, or like something that is not like direct to you. Would you get mad? Or
last time, yeah. I can't really remember last time that I was really mad.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. It's,
right. Yeah. Sorry. That was like my curiosity. That's definitely not part of anything related to languages. So apologies for that.
Oh no, it's fine. It's just yeah. I cannot remember that I was particularly like really mad at something.
Right. So you mentioned that you started with like a recent React Native app. You started writing your bindings, or did you use the community package? How was the experience using React Native?
Yeah, so there are really good bindings for React Native actually. So I think when you look at the ecosystem of bindings, then the React Native ones are really amazing. And I mean, React Native in itself is super cool because it's basically just building blocks. It's a lot more simple than dealing with the DOM. So you have like a text component, you have a view component, and it all really makes sense. I think even on the web. So we had part of our application was web-based, but we still used React Native. And I think the ReScript bindings are very nice. It just it works very well.
Yes.
Like even the style, it has like it comes with like a styling solution, and it's all typed. So yeah, I think Mooks is the one who is maintaining that, and he does a really good job. Like keeps it always up to date. If there's a new React Native version, often it's like days that there's a pull request or like
That's amazing.
Yeah, that experience was amazing. Yeah, it's really good. Yeah.
Right. What's the one thing in ReScript that is very hard, but it shouldn't? Like this thing that you feel like it's very like even not the first time, not the second time that you face it, and still hard to solve. What would you say?
Where like because it's a static language, you are not able to do some things. Like one example is where you have like, for instance, you have a variant and you wanna iterate over all possible values. It's just not possible without a ppx or something like that.
Right.
And yeah, sometimes you just have that situation, and then you kind of like just create like an array and keep them up to date. And I think that when the language is a little like static, I think having meta programming can help a lot. And I think, yeah, then it's just kind of like a shame that it's so hard to do it, that you need to create a ppx, and that barrier is often way too big. So yeah, I think those are the situations that you kind of like want to do some meta programming in order to be productive, and you cannot do, so you have to like repeat yourself a lot. I think that's a big downside for the language. Yeah. Paper extension. Yeah.
Would you, so now that you work 2 years almost in OCaml, or this is in the OCaml compiler, would you feel like you are closer with the OCaml community? Did you get experience to try native or try, I don't know, Dream or any sort of like web development in OCaml?
Yeah, actually, I've been doing some work on ODoc for a long time, actually, but it's like very, very small steps every time I kind of like make some adjustments. But one of my goals is to make documentation nicer, and I think ODoc has very good like fundamentals, and there's a lot of really amazing work happening, but I'm kind of looking into making this documentation generation for ReScript and for OCaml, making it a little bit better and doing some experiments with that. So I've been kind of working on a private branch of ODoc. So that's in OCaml. I think the OCaml community is also amazing. It's very small, but they seem to make a lot of progress last like year or last I think 2 years, with multi-core happening and with effects handlers getting into the language. So I'm actually quite excited about that. I also did some experiments with like initially the reason that I was really enthusiastic about ReasonWell was because it could compile to native. So I did some experiments with OCaml and binding to iOS, and basically creating bindings on a very low level of Objective or like the runtime
Swift or Objective-C.
Yeah, Objective-C, what is it called, the runtime, and that was pretty amazing actually. I wish I could spend a bit more time there because I had like at some point I had like an app running using OCaml that used like JSX to create components, and I was still working on the layout system. I didn't have the Flex system working, but yeah, it's a huge, to be able to do it properly. It's a huge project, but I think that it's it is possible. Like if you look at React Native and you write it in ReScript, it is possible to compile it to native, but it's just like nobody did it. That's I still think there's a huge opportunity because React Native is amazing. Yeah, it's like a pipe dream maybe, but
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Eduardo has fight the same problem once in a while.
Yeah,
so,
but
you mentioned that you
mobile bindings, yeah, or recent mobile project. It's a base.
Yeah, so cool. You mentioned a couple of times that the community is pretty small. What would you think that first? Would you think that it should grow? That's one kind of part of the question, and the other one, like, what should happen to make it grow?
Yeah, if we knew that, yeah, I think it's nice. I like that the community is so small. I think there is also an advantage that like a lot of people are really passionate about it, and they're really like building stuff, building bindings. Like almost everyone in the community has made some bindings or built something in the community. And yeah, the community is just really, really nice. Everyone's helping each other. A lot of people know each other, so that's the good part. But I think Reason and ReScript did get a lot of exposure. So I think a lot of JavaScript folks, they tried it out. I mean, if I look at Twitter, a lot of people to say they're interested in Reason, they read about it, they maybe try it out, but for some reason they don't stick. So yeah. I think the Jordan's involvement and a lot of people, I don't think it's a problem that nobody knows about it, but it's still, for some reason, it's hard to get into. And I think part of the reason is documentation. Documentation could be better, but it's also
right. Let's get deep into that. Why do you think documentation is hard? Because I do agree, but what's the problem with documentation? Because yeah, there might be many, but what do you think is the problem?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a mentality that's also in OCaml that you can just read like the module the signatures, and that should be enough. And it is enough if you're really if you took the first step and you understand the code, then oftentimes you just need to look at the signature and you're fine. But when you're just exposed to it the first time, it's very hard to know what to do. And I think having like good tutorials, having like good getting started, those kind of efforts in the community will make it like. And even if you look at API documentation, often there's the signature, but there's not really like examples how to use it. So yeah, I think. And it's like part that people don't write documentation, but it's also we don't really have amazing tooling. So with Elixir, for some reason in the community, like there's amazing documentation, and there's like a really cool and good documentation tool that everyone uses. So if you use a library, usually there's basic documentation, and it's being generated with this tool. So I'm not really sure if a tool would help, because you still need to write the documentation. But I think like, yeah, having better tools will at least help a little bit.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the culture of like not having an early access or medium knowledge documentation, I think for me are the hard signals of, oh, that the barrier is too high. Like if I look in Google how to send an email in Python, like I have like thousands of links, and without thinking, I can copy paste the thing. It would run, it would crash, but I would have some progress at the end of the, I don't know, 10 minutes or half an hour. I didn't try it out, but if I look it up, how to send an email or camel, I would need to start thinking about the protocol, the like even though the camel doesn't have like the IO, you need to understand like 5 concepts that are not trivial. So even though there's some example, which rarely there is, you have still hard time, and in a race of coding, that for sure is like super lacking. So yeah, I think
and I think like,
kind of like one of the big topics.
Yeah, everyone who's using it knows how amazing it is, like how productive you are. Like especially in a startup, like my last startup, we did so many huge refactors, and you don't have any fear of doing refactors, because you know if it's compiled, you know it's just going to work I think most of the time. But the sound type, that's absolutely not something you have with TypeScript or JavaScript. But I don't know, like you have to experience it to really know how nice it is. And there's just quite a big barrier to get started. And I don't know how to solve that.
Right. Would you say that it's a problem of empathy? Like, you know, would you say like it's actually like what Eduardo said, like I'm fine just reading the interface. I only need the reading the interface to understand everything, where many people read the interface and they not even like notice the arrows, right? They don't even like understand the structure of the interface. Is that part of the empathy between like, let's say us or the community?
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I also heard in the chat some people say we have too many PhDs. It's like, I think this academic influence has, that's kind of like has an influence. It's like like being concise is I think like very valued in academics, and so it's like there is a tendency to have like as small as possible, and like the interface is amazing because it's the minimum and it's enough for most for some people, and it's very beautiful in that sense, but yeah, it's not very accessible, and like the people who know the project, they think it's enough. But I think it's empathy, and it's really it is hard once you are really familiar with something to have this to know how it is when you don't have all this knowledge and when you don't know how to do stuff. So
yeah, these long nights, no, the long nights fighting for errors, right?
Yeah, it's like with GraphqlPPx, I'm like, it's pretty, you know, it's quite simple how it works, but it's not simple at all. I mean, if you're just getting started, but if you're just exposed to it for a long time, it's hard to imagine that.
Yeah, it gets familiar. Yeah, and you kind of like don't remember how like the friction, or don't remember what you need to learn to arrive here. Yeah, totally. You mentioned Elixir, and you only said good things about Elixir. What's the sales pitch for Elixir on the backend?
It's what's the sales pitch of Elixir? So if you're doing real-time stuff, it's amazing. So you can have lightweight processes that are not like OS level processes that that make real-time stuff really easy. So it's basically built on top of Erlang that powers WhatsApp, and it has an internal standard library called OTP. So doing real-time stuff is really easy, and you can do, you don't need many dependencies to be able to build like a chat application or something like that. And I also think like it's functional. It's if you're used to Rails, it's kind of like the next generation. And it's very elegant, I think, how it works, and it's in many ways it's faster. Yeah, I really like it. It has a bit like a Ruby syntax. Some people don't really like that, yeah.
Yeah, cool. Like I'm eager to try for sure.
Yeah, it's I also agree. It's very elegant and like well built. Looks like every piece of it. It's like very well thought by who created it. It's very elegant.
Yeah, the only thing is that it doesn't have types. That's
yeah, that's a shame.
That's what I was going.
If it would have types, it would be like.
So now like we have even Oster, I think, in the chat. So did you try? Did you try it, Caramel?
I didn't run it, but I did look at it, and it's super cool. But I didn't manage to really try it yet. Yeah, I think that's having something that compiles to Elixir is super cool, or Erlang. I think there are a number of like initiatives. So there are multiple initiatives to have like ML type or typed functional languages compiled to Elixir. But yeah, it's super cool. But I still have to try it out.
Right, we need to invite Oster someday, and he can give us definitely like a tryout for sure. So yeah, you said that the community is small and there's some lack of documentation. What about like the number of libraries? I have read the one, you might as well read the blog post about the Darklang company that moved from OCaml to F#, I believe. And one of the complaints were like, of course, documentation, but then the other one was lack of official libraries or maintained libraries. Is that true as well, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think if you're using native OCaml and you're writing a web application, it's there's just not many users, and especially I think his example was like getting, using something like single sign-on. There's not libraries that around, so you need to write everything from scratch. So I think, yeah, even though the language is amazing, there's not, if you don't have the ecosystem, it can be super tough because you just, in a startup, you cannot build everything yourself. Right. So I completely get it. I think on the front end, it's a different story because with JavaScript, I mean, you can easily bind to everything. So I'm kind of in the camp that I try not to use like bindings if it's not necessary, because usually the interface that you use, like the functionality that you use from a JavaScript library is usually not that big. So writing a few bindings, it's not that much work, and you're not like, you don't need to rely on another dependency. So I think like, yeah, that's actually that's super great about ReScript, that you can just like bind to everything quite easily in the JavaScript ecosystem.
Yeah, totally. And you had a lot of experience with Easy in the, like, I believe like graphql-ppx is built with Easy, or Easy. I don't know how that's pronounced, but probably is Easy. How's that package managed for you compared to OPAM if you try it out, or what's the story behind that? Because we all know that it's a crucial, but we all suffer a little bit. So what from like the maintainer point of view?
Yeah, for me it works quite well, and I think it's I would prefer that OCaml would have like an integrated solution for this, because OPAM, it's nice, but it's manager and it's like global packages. And with Easy, you have like a sandbox, so you can have like you can lock dependencies to a particular project. And I think that approach is super nice, and it works really well. So I think needing to have like OPAM and Easy and all those things separate projects, that's a bit of a shame. But from my experience with Easy, it's super good. And it's actually quite amazing that I think it's only being maintained by one person, and it works really well. Just like sometimes you have like conflicts, and it can be a bit tricky, but that's with every package manager you can have those.
Right. Definitely. I think I smashed like all my questions up. So if anyone from the chat has a question, please, it's time to pop up. Or of course, Gabriel, if you have any, for sure.
Yeah, I think
OPAM supports switches. That's true. Sorry about that.
Yeah. I think the biggest the biggest annoyance when I'm using is like coming from a npm background. It's because it's super cryptic when you get conflicts. Like you have no fucking idea how to make the conflict go away, because you like just want to do some ppx stuff, and then you start some dependency and then have no idea what are those internal packages conflicting about. So you either like copy paste from someone else that already figured out, or you spend like days and hours trying to find out why those packages are not syncing in.
Yeah.
But overall the sandboxing is pretty good. Not sure if anyone in the chat has any questions. Okay, I would like just to discuss a bit more about the meta programming part. Like that's at least for me, in the day-to-day usage, one place that I really miss, like not having meta programming very easily, is like when I have to do some iterate over the keys of a record. I have some use case for that usually, but it's like so annoying to have to write everything down, and not being able to depend, like being afraid of ppxs to break anytime from now. It's kind of annoying.
Yeah, I agree. And it's just you're not going to like. I have this as well, but it's not like I'm not going to write ppx just for that one thing. But then you have like many of those small things where if they would be available, it would be amazing. But for any single thing, it's like the effort to make a ppx is just too big. So I think we've been talking at Walnut to create like a ppx that has just one ppx that has like all the small things we want to have available to us.
There was a project created by Jared, which of course he's not with us anymore in the sense of contributing.
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace. So it was called Reason Macros, I believe, which was some sort of like string manipulation. I don't know how was that in Elixir, but it was really like from the outside felt very hacky, but super easy to generate those. It was like a meta ppx. Yeah, I don't want to get too complex, but the same idea. Would you think that that would help creating like these easy meta programming files, or even like inlining with your source code? Or do you think that's too powerful? Because I saw a discussion before in the chat where like they were like, no, metaprogramming should be hard. It's not abused because it's the source of many problems. What's your view on those?
Yeah, actually, that was an amazing project, and I tried to run it, but it didn't. I couldn't get it to work because it was already quite old, and I don't know. It was just. But I think that project was pretty cool. It's just probably a bit like hackish. Doing it as ppx is possible, but it's probably better to have like a language solution inside of the language. But I agree, like metaprogramming, you shouldn't do it if it's not necessary. But once there's a use case, it can be, or at least in some situations, it's super powerful and it's really helpful, and it makes it can make you quite a bit more productive. But I like in Elixir, they say like you shouldn't use macros, but if you look at some of the best libraries, they use a lot of macros, and that makes the library so powerful. So if you look at like Phoenix, it's basically all built on top of macros. But yeah, like so I'm a big fan of macros, but I think some people go overboard and they try to use macros for everything, and then it becomes really hard to debug stuff. And I agree. It's like a trade-off, but having them, it's definitely a good thing. You just have to be careful where to use it, I guess.
Right. Yeah, similar messaging with ReScript team. They are just like not as good as other people communicating. But I think the same messaging goes from them, sure. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, I think we already covered most of the questions, right? We can already start to
definitely.
To wrap it up. I don't know if anyone in the chat has some question for
or you Jaap want to add anything, or if you are hiring a Walnut or whatever space that you want to fill.
If you look for an amazing company, we're hiring. I think everyone's hiring here. So, send me PM and.
Cool. What do you guys do at Walnut? Just to close the
sponsorship.
Yeah, the sponsorship. Yeah.
Sorry, what was the question?
Yeah, what you guys do at Walnut?
It's a sales experience platform. So it's basically makes it really easy to create demos for SaaS software, without like giving your like prospects like an environment, like a real login. It's just a very lightweight way to share how the product is working, and they can click around. And so it's a Chrome plugin where you can create a demo, and so salespeople can do that to have very early on in the sales process. They can say, "Oh, this is actually the product, and this is how you can use it." And this demo, you can they can customize it very easily. So you can like put the logo of the prospect in the demo, and you can change everything in like a real what you get editor. So it really helps salespeople sell software service products.
Perfect. Cool. That was cool. So I think it's time to wrap up a little bit. So Gabriel, all yours.
Yeah, it's okay. No questions from the chat. So it was a pretty good show. Like I like it a lot. Like the chat interacted. Everyone being very fun as always. So thanks everyone for joining us. It was pretty good. There is one question from was terrible. One last time, the last one. What would you? That's a tough one.
I would, if I had the choice, I would maybe include the GraphqlPPX in a language. Would be I think it would make the language like I think it would be nice to have some way to really stand out as a language, and having like GraphQL as part of the language would be amazing. I'm not really sure if it's a good idea, but I might be quite interesting.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely a good idea, or at least sounds good idea for now. Yeah. Cool. So yeah, Jaap, thanks for your time. I think that was like super fun interview, and I think like I don't know, I think I got a feeling like I asked you 100 questions. Hope that you explain well. So yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming. Thanks everyone for joining us again. The video of this interview will be soon available on YouTube. And see everyone on the next show. See you guys.
See you guys.
Cheers.
See you. So let me just wrap up